Hi everyone, I wanted to discuss with you a little bit about the laws of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics says that energy cannot be created or destroyed, so we have a fixed amount of energy in the universe. The second law of thermodynamics is very interesting. It says that since we have a fixed amount of energy in the universe, obviously, we all have to be able to live off this fixed amount of energy. So we can't necessarily create energy, but we can convert it from one form to another. So this figure here is referring to the laws of thermodynamics and how that plays out in real life. So this kind of lime green box here is talking about primary producers. These are organisms that have the ability to take the energy from the sun, which is the energy that we have available to us here on Earth, and convert it into usable energy for life. There are very few types of organisms on the earth that can be a primary producer. Those that we usually think of would be plants. Plants are a great example of this, but not the only example. Sometimes we have some bacteria that have the ability to photosynthesize, and we also have algae and phytoplankton and some organisms that float in the ocean that are also able to photosynthesize. Any group that's able to photosynthesize is considered a primary producer because they produce the Earth's food. All of the food for the Earth comes from these primary producers. Therefore, it's necessary to have a very large amount of these primary producers because everything else on Earth that's considered either an herbivore, which eats only plants, or a carnivore, which eats meat, these are the organisms that are all dependent upon the primary producers. So we have to have a whole lot of them in order to produce enough food for themselves, obviously, but also for everything else on Earth to be supported. So we have this kind of base, a very large base of organisms that can photosynthesize and therefore be primary producers. The next level, trophic level or eating level, would be those organisms that eat the plants or the photosynthesizing organisms. This is what we call the herbivores. So they have an entirely plant-based or photosynthesizing organism-based diet. And you can see there has to be many fewer of those organisms than the primary producers for the simple matter that the primary producers need some of that energy for themselves, and they also need to support everybody above them. And as you see, as we go up the trophic levels, the amount of organisms that can actually be that type of eater have to be less and less because there's just less available to them. So this is kind of a basic understanding of trophic levels, but what I really want to point out here that has to do with Chapter 2 is how energy is lost from one trophic level to another. So the photosynthesizers take their energy directly from the sun to produce glucose, which is the basis of food energy on the earth. They produce that glucose, of course, for themselves because they need to support themselves and their tissues. But we, as everybody else on the earth, is able to take advantage of their glucose as well by eating them. So what we have are the herbivores eating the primary producers. So this would be like an example of a cow eating grass in the pasture. But the thing that we want to notice here is that energy is lost. This is the second law of thermodynamics. So the first law says that energy cannot be created or destroyed. The second law says that when you can convert energy, and when you convert energy from one form, in the form of glucose in this example from the photosynthesizers, to another form, from food being consumed by these herbivores, when you convert energy from one level to another, you're always going to lose energy in the process. That's because no energy conversion can ever be 100% efficient. That's the second law of thermodynamics. When you convert energy from one form to another, you are never going to be 100% efficient. In fact, as you can see, it says right here about 10% of the energy at one trophic level is actually available to the next level. So out of 100% of the energy absorbed from the sun by these producers to make glucose for themselves, only 10% of that is available to the next level. And at the same time, if you move up in the levels, only 10% of what was available here to these herbivores will be available to anything that eats those herbivores. So for example, if you have a carnivore that eats both meat and plants like we do, then this carnivore would only have 10% of the available energy of what this first level herbivore had. In addition to that, any higher level carnivore that's going to eat other carnivores as well as potentially some of the producers will have even less energy available to them. So we have an energy loss constantly going on at every energy level. Every energy conversion causes less and less energy to be available to the next level. This is because of the laws of thermodynamics. Energy can be converted from one form to another, but when you do convert energy from one form to another, you'll always lose energy in the process. Where does that energy go? Well, the first law says energy is not created or destroyed. So where does it go? Well, it goes back to the universe as heat. Heat is a very hard thing to grab a hold of and convert back into something useful. That's why we always have heat being lost from our cars. That's why we can't just grab the heat coming out of our heater for our home and reuse it. It's very difficult for us to reuse heat for this earth as usable energy. So it gets dissipated back to the universe as useless energy, and that is where most of the conversion energy is lost on the earth. It's incredibly significant. 90% at each and every level is lost to the universe as heat.